Welcome back to Murder on Record, where every case is etched in blood and the truth is buried in the fine print. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we dig through the dusty files, the overlooked evidence, and the whispered testimonies to bring long-forgotten crimes back into the light. Today, we're plunging into a 1996 Arizona case that, well, it chills to the bone. The attempted contract killing of Lynn Carlson, allegedly orchestrated by her own sister-in-law, Doris Carlson.
Yeah, it's quite a story.
And it's not just, a straightforward crime. It's this whole labyrinth of greed, a really brutal act of violence, and honestly, a testament to one woman's incredible will to survive.
Absolutely. What immediately grabbed you about this case, even looking back now, is just the sheer audacity of it. You have Doris Carlson accused of hiring two men, and Scott were their names, to murder Lynn Carlson, her brother's wife.
And the motive seems pretty clear from the get-go.
Yeah, apparently all for potential financial gain. It unfolded back on October 25th, 1996 in Arizona. So our mission, I guess, in this deep dive is to really dissect this chilling plot. We need to look at the evidence that led to arrests, which happened surprisingly fast, actually.
Right.
And also probe some of those lingering questions that still kind of cast a shadow over the whole thing.
Okay, let's really dig into this alleged plot then, this blood money plot. The driving force, like you said, according to the sources, it was financial, simple greed.
Seems like it. Doris Carlson supposedly stood to gain quite a bit from Lynn's death. Maybe inheritance, maybe insurance payouts.
And there's this figure mentioned, $20,000, as the sort of agreed-upon sum for the hit.
20 grand. It's just such a stark number, isn't it? Really underscores the cold calculation involved.
But here's something the sources don't fully clarify, which seems important. Did any of that money actually change hands before the attack? Like, was it paid up front?
That is a key detail, yeah.
Yeah.
Because whether it was like a firm payment already made or just a promise,
Yeah.
that says a lot, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
speaks volumes about the nature of the agreement, the level of planning, the premeditation.
For sure.
The sources suggest Doris recruited Dan. He was the one who actually did the stabbing, and then Scott, who was supposed to stage a burglary to cover it up.
Right, the distraction.
Yeah. So the planning, even if some specifics are a bit, hazy, it points to a deliberate attempt to disguise the crime. You just have to wonder about the conversations, right? The convincing, maybe even coercing that led these guys to agree to something so violent.
And this is where the story just takes a truly dramatic, horrible turn. Around 1 a.m., October 25th, 1996, Dan and Scott apparently go into Lynn's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And they even go as far as disconnecting the television, presumably trying to make it look like a real burglary.
Right.
A random act.
Bolsters the illusion, yeah.
Then the attack itself, just brutal. Lynn was stabbed multiple times, the reports say, somewhere between 8 and 10 times.
And specifically in the throat and upper body. I mean, it's almost incomprehensible that someone could survive that.
Exactly. Yet she did. Not only did Lynn survive that initial attack, but somehow she was able to identify multiple attackers.
That part is incredible.
How did she manage that in the middle of something so chaotic, so violent? That's a question that just, really sticks with you.
It absolutely does. Her ability to identify them while suffering those horrific injuries, it speaks to incredible resilience. Or maybe, perhaps, there was some detail in the attack itself, something they did or said, that allowed her that crucial insight. We won't fully know.
A terrible clarity in that moment, maybe.
Maybe. And while she did survive initially, the trauma was just immense. Lynn fought for her life for 6 agonizing months. She endured severe medical complications before, tragically, she succumbed to her injuries. That was on April 21st, 1997.
So she survived the attack, but ultimately died because of it.
Exactly. Yeah. But what's also really remarkable here is how quickly the investigation moved. All 4 suspects, that's Doris, her brother David, and the 2 accomplices, Dan and Scott, they were all arrested on November 21st, 1996.
Wow. Okay, that's less than a month after the attack.
Yeah. And think about it. This is pre-widespread DNA analysis, pre-digital tracking like we have now.
Right. No cell phone pings, none of that.
Exactly. So that speed suggests a really effective initial investigation. You have to wonder, what were the key pieces of evidence or testimonies? What let them move so fast?
Well, that leads us straight into the trial and the evidence that really seemed to nail Doris, that $20,000 payment agreement you mentioned. That was undoubtedly huge.
The major factor, yeah. The court clearly saw that as a significant aggravating circumstance, payment for murder.
And beyond that, the investigators, they were apparently able to piece together inconsistencies at the crime scene, things that just didn't fit the burglary story.
So the staged burglary wasn't quite convincing enough.
Apparently not. It sort of exposed the deception. You have to imagine the meticulous work, right? Examining every little detail to unravel it.
And the judge's decision, imposing the death penalty on Doris Carlson, that really underscores how gravely the court viewed her crime. The judge specifically pointed out 3 aggravating factors.
Okay, what were they?
1, procuring payment for the murder itself. 2, the motive being personal financial gain. And 3, the nature of the crime described as especially heinous and cruel.
Especially heinous. That's strong language from the court.
Very. And it's worth noting, the defense did argue for leniency. They brought up claims of brain damage Doris supposedly had.
Brain damage. Oh.
Yeah, and also the fact that she had no prior criminal record. They were pushing for mitigation based on those points.
But ultimately, those arguments didn't sway the judge.
Apparently not. The judge rejected them. You have to ask, why weren't they convincing? What was it about the prosecution's case that just overcame those potential mitigating factors?
Which brings us back nicely to some of those lingering questions we mentioned earlier. We already talked about the uncertainty around the $20,000. Was it actually paid? Was it just promised?
Exactly. It's a subtle distinction, but it could reveal more about, how concrete the conspiracy was. Was it a done deal or still just talk?
And then there's Doris's brother, David. His name comes up. He was arrested too.
Right. But his precise role, it remains somewhat unclear, at least from the information we have readily available.
So was he fully aware? Did he actively participate? Or was he somehow just, caught up in it without knowing the full extent?
The court documents don't necessarily paint a complete picture of his involvement. It leaves room for speculation, doesn't it? What were the real boundaries of this conspiracy? Who knew what exactly?
It's also fascinating, like you touched on, thinking about this case in the context of, it's time. The mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
No advanced digital forensics like today. So those rapid arrests, they suggest a reliance on different techniques, right?
Absolutely. Maybe really strong witness testimony. Perhaps Lynn's initial identification was just that powerful.
Or detailed analysis of the physical evidence they did have. Maybe fibers, prints, the state of the apartment.
Could be. Or inconsistencies in those initial interviews with the suspects. Classic police work, really. You wonder what specific methods were crucial back then before all the tech took over.
Yeah. And it's interesting, too, how different sources frame the case.
How so?
Well, you look at court records, and they're very focused, understandably, on the legal points, the evidence, the findings of fact. Very procedural.
Right. Dry, but necessary.
Then you might see something like, say, on Murderpedia or similar sites, and the narrative can be a bit more sensationalized, maybe, focusing on Doris as a woman orchestrating this kind of violent crime.
Ah, yeah. That angle. Why do these different framings emerge? It tells you something about our fascination with true crime, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And how stories get shaped for, public consumption.
It does.
For me, though, the most compelling thing is still Lynn's initial survival. Just fighting back against those odds. And paired with that, the almost unbelievable level of betrayal from someone within her own extended family. It's deeply unsettling.
It really highlights a potential darkness that can exist, just below the surface in seemingly ordinary relationships. And thinking about that brain damage claim again, despite the defense presenting it, the jury wasn't persuaded it lessened Doris's culpability.
Right, which raises tough questions about the legal threshold for diminished capacity. How do juries weigh complex medical evidence against the sheer horror of the crime itself?
Did the sources give any detail on the specifics of the medical evidence? Or why it ultimately failed to convince the jury? That seems like a key point we're missing.
That level of detail often doesn't make it into the summaries we easily access, unfortunately. It likely came down to how it was presented, countered by the prosecution, and, the jury's interpretation.
Right, the human element in the jury room.
Exactly. And one last point on context, the historical timeline. Doris Carlson's death sentence came well before Arizona paused executions in 2022.
Interesting point. So her case sits in a specific legal and social moment regarding capital punishment there.
Precisely. What were the prevailing attitudes back then? The legal standards surrounding the death penalty in Arizona at that time? How might that have influenced the outcome? It adds another layer, doesn't it?
It really does. So, wrapping up this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're left with this stark picture. A contract-killing plot fueled by greed, a truly vicious attack that was miraculously survived, at least initially.
Surprisingly swift investigation for the era.
And ultimately a death sentence. But just beneath that surface, there are still these layers, these unanswered questions, the specifics of the money, the brother's exact role, the reasons the mitigation failed.
Yeah, lots of shadows still lingering.
It's a chilling reminder, really, of the complexities that often hide within even cases that seem, at first glance, somewhat clear-cut.
Until next time, stay curious.
And keep your eyes on the evidence.